Hello my dear friends, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Friends, we are discussing about the anatomy of the larynx. So previous lecture was about the ligaments of the larynx. Now in this lecture we are going to discuss about the laryngeal cavity or the cavity of the larynx. So laryngeal cavity, as we have it in the diagram here, so it begins. In which area does it begin and which area does it ends, we will see it right now. So first of all, let me show you here that this cavity from this line right up to this area, this whole cavity is called the laryngeal cavity, right? What is this line called? What is this area called? We will see right now, but no problem. Just to put in your mind that this part is called the laryngeal cavity. Now look carefully. It extends from the inlet of the larynx. Inlet of the larynx means this part is the actual inlet of the larynx. Now where it communicates with the lumen of the laryngopharynx, okay, to the lower border of the cricoid cartilage, where it continues with the lumen of the trachea. So laryngeal cavity, right, it extends from the laryngeal inlet up to the continuation of the lumen of the trachea. So here begins your trachea. This is your trachea, right? Lower, this is trachea. From here down there it is trachea. Now from this point, from the opening of the trachea up to the laryngeal inlet, this cavity is called the laryngeal cavity. Okay, the interior wall of laryngeal cavity is longer than the posterior wall. We know that posterior wall is little bit shorter, interior wall is little bit longer. Laryngeal inlet is obliquely placed, sloping downward and backward. Okay, it opens into the laryngopharynx. Now, what are the boundaries of the laryngeal cavity? It has three boundaries. It has four boundaries, but we divide into three. The interior boundary of it is found by the epiglottis. The posterior boundary is found by the interarytenoid fold of mucous membranes, right? And the two lateral boundaries are found by aryepiglottic folds of mucous membranes. So we'll see here are aryepiglottic folds. We'll see it next. So laryngeal cavity, it was its introduction. Now laryngeal cavity is subdivided into three parts: the vestibule of the larynx, the ventricles or sinus of the larynx, right, and the infraglottic compartment, or we call it the glottic compartment, right, the supraglottic compartment and the infraglottic compartment. So look, vestibule, this part, you know, here this big area, this big opening is called the vestibule. So it's shown also here, and this area is actual glottis. This area is the actual glottis. So that's why we say that the area of the cavity, right, or the division of the cavity above the glottis is called the supraglottic compartment, and below the glottis is called the infraglottic compartment. So this is infraglottic region, this is supraglottic region, and this region is the glottic region or glottis. So vestibule, it extends from the laryngeal inlet to the vestibular folds. Look carefully, these are the vestibular folds up to here, right? These are vestibular folds. You can see it here, these are vestibular folds. So from the inlet up to vestibular folds, this area is called the vestibule or supraglottic compartment. Its interior wall is formed by the mucous membrane covering the posterior surface of the epiglottis. Its posterior wall is formed by the mucous membrane which covers the apices of the arytenoid cartilages. Okay, then and cornicular cartilage. On sides there are aryepiglottic folds. So these are not so important points, but we should just remember the three important regions of it. Then there are ventricles or sinus of the larynx, or we call it glottic compartment. It is deep elliptical space between the vestibular folds on each side A narrow blend diverticulum of mucous membrane extends posterior superiorly between the vestibular folds and lamina of thyroid cartilage called the saccules of the larynx. These parts are called the saccules. These vestibular folds come down and they go back upward. So they make a space here, an empty space here. These spaces are called the saccules. So you can see in this picture, these saccules are shown very prominently, right? So these are called saccules. And what is the importance about these saccules? It is provided with mucous membrane, mucous glands. These saccules contain mucous glands whose secretions lubricate the vocal cords, which helps us in talking freely and producing sound, right? So hence it is also termed as oil can of the larynx. So oil can of the larynx are the saccules of the larynx. They produce mucus, they produce oily lubricant fluid. Then there is the infraglottic compartment. The infraglottic compartment extends from the vocal folds to the lower border of cricoid cartilage. So this area will be the lower border of cricoid cartilage, and these are the vocal folds. These are vestibular folds, and these two are the vocal folds, right? True vocal folds or vocal folds. And this is the tracheal, this is the beginning of the trachea or the end or the lower border of cricoid cartilage. So this is infraglottic region, this is glottic region, this is supraglottic region. Okay, so this was about the laryngeal cavity, my friends, right? Now, what about the arterial supply of the larynx? So our larynx takes its arterial supply from two big arteries, superior laryngeal artery and inferior laryngeal artery. You can see in this diagram, I have shown it. So this is the right common carotid artery, right? And this is the right subclavian artery. So from these arteries, there are certain branches which separate and supply blood to the larynx. So above the vocal folds, right? Above the vocal fold, it is supplied with superior laryngeal artery, a branch of superior thyroid artery. And below the vocal folds, it is supplied with inferior laryngeal artery, a branch of inferior thyroid artery. So superior thyroid artery and inferior thyroid artery are responsible to supply blood to the larynx. Then what about the nerve supply or innervation? The motor innervation is provided by the internal and external laryngeal nerves, and sensory innervation is provided. The mucous membrane of the larynx above the vocal folds is supplied by internal laryngeal nerve, while below the folds are recurrent laryngeal nerve. So you can see this is recurrent laryngeal nerve, right? And this is superior laryngeal nerve. So we say above the vocal folds superior laryngeal nerve, below the vocal folds recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay, what about the venous drainage of the larynx? The venous drainage accompanies also the arteries. So these are superior laryngeal vein and inferior laryngeal vein. So both of them drain into superior thyroidal vein and inferior thyroidal vein. Done. Then what about the lymphatic drainage of the larynx? Again above the vocal folds, right? The thyroid membrane, okay, there are lymph vessels which pierce this membrane. This is called the thyroid membrane, right? As in the previous lecture we have discussed. So you can see there is a hole, there is a foramen in which these veins and lymphatics enter. So look carefully. Above the vocal folds pierce the thyroid membrane, run along superior thyroid vessels and drain into the upper deep cervical lymph nodes, right? So above the vocal folds, they are drained by the cervical lymph nodes, and below the vocal folds, right, they are also drained by cervical lymph nodes, but the difference is the upper deep cervical lymph nodes and lower deep cervical lymph nodes. So here are lower deep cervical lymph nodes and upper deep cervical lymph nodes. So they drain the venous fluid from the larynx. So my dear friends, I have tried my best to cover everything about the larynx. So these were the notes which I have made by myself. Any one of you if you want the PDF of these notes, you can tell me in the comment section. I will provide you guys. You can text with your WhatsApp numbers, then I will send these PDF notes to you guys, which have all the important points that I have mentioned in my lectures. So inshallah, in the next lecture we will start discussing about the trachea. See you guys there. Till then, Allah Hafiz.